Hey there, pioneers. Welcome to the Reflections Cast, designed to immerse you in teachings about goal setting, dream building, and all things dynamic living. Join us for inspiring conversations as we unwrap these topics and offer insights for seeking positive change in your life. Here's Season 2, Episode 6, Guidelines for Effective Goal Setting Continued. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you guys are ready to continue this awesome series with Skip on these guidelines for effective goal setting. We talked about 1 and 2 in the last episode. And in this episode, we're going to be going over 3, 4, and 5, and many more to come. So buckle in, get your notepads ready. But before we get into that, I just wanted to say, my name is Steve.
And I'm Melody.
And we're pumped to have you here. We hope that you have been enjoying this podcast experience in this new year. We've been seeing a lot of great growth and numbers on our feeds, and we're really excited that people are enjoying what it is that we're producing here. And I just wanted to make sure to invite you all, give us feedback. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. There's plenty of different ways to do that, but we are very much listening to our email and our Spotify and our YouTube channels. So if you throw a comment up there, we'll see it and we will respond to it on the show. You can reach us at thereflectionscast@gmail.com if you'd like to send us an email, or just send a comment on whatever platform you're listening on. As well, we've been seeing a big growth internationally. And so I just wanted to say a shout out to some of the countries around the world that are tuning in. Skip traveled around the world a lot and spoke in many different countries. And so I hope that the viewers that we're connecting with around the world, maybe they've connected with Skip's previous teachings and wanted to find out a little bit more about what's been going on. So welcome to the podcast. On this podcast, we look at some of the teachings that Skip has done and give a little commentary, flesh it out, provide some additional context and clarity to explore some of these ideas that Skip was famous for talking about. And I'm really excited to get into it with Melody here today, because I think that these guidelines are this ramp to the finale that I'm hyped about. So, Melody, before we get into this thing, could you tell us some other great things that are happening in all things Reflections Cast and Circle A and Pioneer Circle?
Absolutely. Like Steven said, we are really delighted to have new listeners joining the podcast. So if you are new and you haven't listened to too many episodes, you may be interested to know that as we are pursuing this relaunch of everything Circle A, this reimagining of what Circle A looks like in this next generation, we have begun to do a couple other things besides the Reflections Cast. So we have launched the Pioneer Circle, which is essentially a coaching platform that includes a daily goal setting app, daily text encouragements and video encouragements, a monthly coaching call, and just all sorts of content that's really focused on resourcing young people to live well in this moment. So if you are a young person, or you know a young person, or you serve young people and you are interested in connecting with that content, you can actually check out our brand new website. So we still have our information available at circleacamp.com. That was the website that we have been sharing with you guys. But as we prepare to launch the Pioneer Circle to a greater audience, we now have a dedicated website for the Pioneer Circle. So we would love for you guys to check out that site. It is www.pioneercircle.org. O-R-G. So that's pioneercircle.org. And we'd love to have you guys check it out. Check out what we're doing with this coaching platform, because we really believe that it can impact the next generation of rising leaders in a profound way. And we're really excited to be a part of it and be a part of this next phase of Circle A. Also, just really quick, I will give a plug that we do have our Circle A Summit coming up this June in Michigan. So if you are interested in being a part of our live in-person Circle A experience, which is a family camp style of environment this summer, go ahead to circleacamp.com. You can check out all of the information on the summit and get yourself registered. We'd love to have you guys.
Thank you, Melody. You guys got to check out the new site. It is awesome. So I want to see a lot of new clicks on the site as soon as this episode goes out, because you guys, you don't want to miss out on it. All right. Well, we are going to transition into our time with Skip. And as far as I've seen, you guys all seem to really dig his new AI empowered voice. and are digging the lesson as well. So I'm really excited to get into it. It is yet again AI empowered. So let us know how you like Dad's new voice. I just think it's really cool that Dad was known for having a great listening ability. He had these bionic ears that could hear for miles and miles. And now he's got this amazing voice that lives throughout time. So let's get into some wisdom with Skip. Here he is, the guidelines for effective goal setting.
Number 3, goals must be stated positively. This is articulating it as though you already possess it and not as something you're trying to get rid of. The unconscious mind has an uncanny way of filtering out and focusing upon negatives. I do not know for sure if that's the way God designed us. I do not know for sure. I don't find enough biblical evidence to tell me that that's the enemy of our souls that causes that in us. It's one of those areas where I say, when I get to heaven, this is one of the first questions I'm going to ask. Was the focus on the negatives in life, was that created by you, God? But I suspect when I get to heaven, I see him face to face, that won't make any difference at all. And I'll never ask the question there, so I'll never know the answer to that. And it'll be okay, along with a number of other questions that bother me from time to time. Fewer and fewer questions bother me, however. As life continues to roll along, I am more and more comfortable with the fact that God is in control and there are things I don't have to figure out. He does just fine without my help. Okay. So leave all of the negatives out of your goal setting. There have been certain periods of time in my life when I've been more actively involved in helping people establish goals and affirmations for their life than others. Currently, there are not many people that I'm working with on that basis, though there have been several just recently that have asked if I would write their goals for them so they make sure that they're stated properly, or affirmations about their goals so they're stated properly. I have resolutely refused to do that. Consistently through the years, I have refused to write it for other people, including Susan, who has asked me on occasion. If I write them, they're mine. If she writes them, they're hers. Now, what I have said to many people, and the people most recently who asked, I said, I would be happy once you write them to take a look at them and to look for the negative expression in it, or the word that isn't quite right, the word that doesn't say what you want to say, and make some suggestions along the side, and then you can change it if you choose to. Whenever I do that, it's always an amazing thing to me. I consistently say to people, eliminate everything negative from your goal statement. Eliminate everything negative, all negative words out of your affirmations. And so they sit down and they write, and back comes the affirmation or the goal, and it is filled with negative words. It is just an absolute mystery to me. So I make my little notes. I change tenses and I change words and send it back and say, write it again. I kid you not, frequently they rewrite it and send it back for me to take a second look. And there are still many of those same negative words, which I scratched out, wrote a different word for, and sent back to them. I have on occasion gone through a person's goals 5 times in a row to finally get rid of all the negatives. If you live in an environment where negatives just seem to be kind of a commonplace, if you are surrounded and conditioned by it, you will not see a lot of those things as being negative. So the things that just kind of boom, jump off the page at me may go right on for you as though they are fine words. Now, I don't say that to brag on my ability to spot the negative. I mean, what kind of a boast is that? I can see the negative faster than you can. That's not a boast. It's just I have controlled my environment and my vocabulary for so many years and eliminated so many of the negative concepts and ways of stating things that they actually do jump off the page at me or jump through the air in conversations. And I am more aware than most. So I have helped people. I continue to do that, continue to be willing. I just encourage you, get rid of everything negative. When I'm talking to people, oftentimes I know far more about what they don't want than what they do want. Because we tend to talk about what we don't want in trying to somehow get a fence built around this, what we do want. And that isn't the process that works best. The process is talk about what's inside the fence that you do want and put it in terminology that is positive. And number 4, goals be stated in the present tense. The present tense. Think of them in your mind as now. This currently exists. Write it down as though it is now a current reality. It is the way things are right now. That's the emphasis. When you write your goal, write it in the present tense. It is currently happening. It's not going to. It's not, it did. It is now happening. That's the way the unconscious mind gets a hold of it most firmly and begins to work with you on making sure that it does happen. That was number 4. Number 5 guideline. The power of well-defined goals cannot be overemphasized. The power of well-defined goals cannot be overemphasized. Written, rehearsed, and reconfirmed. Those are 3 words that are really important. Written, rehearsed, and reconfirmed. If it's not specific, it's not a goal. If it's not written, it's not a goal. If it's not specific, it's not a goal. Broad desires and lofty aims have little effect on the unconscious part of the goal setting process. Little effect. So if you want to have lofty aims and broad desires and not get specific about it, you can do that. It's just not very effective in terms of goal setting. The more concrete and specific and deliberately these things are defined, the more powerfully everything that's available to you to make them happen becomes. It just becomes more powerful.
All right, so there we have our next guidelines for effective goal setting. I love hearing Dad's teaching every time. It makes me better. So I'm glad we get to share it with you guys. So quick recap of what we just heard from Skip. Essentially, he gave us 3 more guidelines. So this is the continuation of last week's episode. So we're on point number 3, which is that goals must be stated positively. And of course, we've heard this from Skip in many ways over the years, but he does say it very clearly and emphatically in this recording, which I love hearing. He's talking about articulating it as though you already possess it and not as something you're trying to get rid of. And that's really, really important, because I do think a lot of us kind of think about what we want to get rid of in our lives, and then that comes across in the way that we might word our goals. So he said the unconscious mind has an uncanny way of filtering out and focusing upon negatives. So very interesting that our brains kind of do that even without our permission. So we have to work a little extra hard to focus on the positive framework. So instead of framing goals as things to be avoided or eliminated, he invites us to state them as affirmations of what we want to achieve. And the idea is to articulate goals in a way that reflects a current reality. So this positive thing is true in our lives, because that fosters this mindset that aligns with achieving those goals. He does make it clear that he does not think it's the best way to go about it if you have someone else write your goals for you. I don't think he ever did that for anyone, as he states in this recording. But he does definitely, it's definitely good to have a second set of eyes on it and have that accountability check to see, like, am I putting this in the best wording possible, since I'm going to essentially be retraining my brain with these particular words. And he says some people do have that ability to kind of see those negative expressions more easily than others. Like, he was definitely one of those people that had that. So it's okay to seek counseling about that. So that's number 3, stating the goals positively. Number 4 is that goals must be stated in the present moment tense. So we're writing these goals down as though they are a current reality. And this really just stresses the importance of expressing the goal in the present moment as if it's already happening. And the technique of doing that, it aims to create like a sense of immediacy and reality, which encourages a proactive mindset. So, for instance, instead of saying, I will be financially successful, you would just frame it as, I am currently achieving financial success. And while it might feel a little awkward to say something that isn't currently true, when you're writing it as a goal, you want to program your brain in this way to see it as something that is true. And then the last one he gives us in this recording is that essentially the power of well-defined goals cannot be overemphasized. And he says, if it's not specific, it's not a goal. So he uses these words written, rehearsed, and reconfirmed as something that we're going to be doing with these goals. Written, rehearsed, and reconfirmed. Essentially, these goals are clear, they're specific, they're measurable. And this guideline kind of underscores that impact of precision in goal setting. Because when goals are specific, they provide a clear roadmap for action. They make it easier to track progress, whereas vague goals or broad goals kind of lack the clarity that we need to really effectively plan and execute on our goals. So he says, broad desires and lofty aims have little effect on the unconscious part of the goal setting process. So a lot to think about in this little 10-minute recording, but I'm glad we got to share it together. Stephen, what did you think about this one?
Yeah, I love this aspect of the guidelines, whereas in the previous teaching, we were talking about these very specific, concrete, tangible things of, hey, they've got to be written, they've got to be personal. And now we're kind of veering into, okay, not only do they have to be in this way, but they have to be formulated in a way that connects with our mind at a very specific level so that it becomes not just real, but it's all about framing it in that way of hacking your mind or reprogramming your mind or changing that mindset that we've been maybe oversaturated with in our lives. And I think that this is a really great part of these guidelines to make sure that we're doing this goal setting process correctly. So yeah, I loved it. And I definitely have a couple of questions for you if you're ready for them.
Absolutely. Let's jump in.
So with these questions, I thought it would be best, they're not the most deep questions, but I also think that they can be taken in a deep way. So these questions are kind of just reminders or a repeat of what he said, maybe in a different way, that can give a little bit more clarity. And so the first question is, can we talk a little bit more about that positive aspect of goal setting? What is the importance of being so particular about stating goals in a positive way? I mean, he talks about in this that it's so ingrained in him that the words when he's looking at people's goals literally jump off the page.
Yeah.
And he's just taken aback by them. Can we put some more concrete statement as to why that's a key aspect of creating a goal? Because I think that, to a more melancholy focused mindset, the idea of making it, there's some positive, floaty, wishful idea. That has nothing to do with goal setting.
Right. Yeah, I do think it's a great question. I think that, if someone is committing to this process that he's teaching, we're essentially committing to a process of rewiring our actual brains, right? We're not just writing down a list of things that we want to happen. We are committing to a process of reading or writing or saying these particular words in a particular way twice a day. That's the process that he teaches. Maybe some of us only do it once a day. Maybe some of us don't do it every day, but that's the aim. And so when we're doing that every day, we essentially are using the neuroplasticity of our brains to build new neural pathways, to create new healthy trees of thought in our brains. And so the more specific and particular and positive we can be with our word choice, the better growth we're going to have in our actual mind, in our actual brain. So, we could write a goal that doesn't have any particularly positive words in it, or we could even write a goal that has some negative verbiage in it. And it might not matter for the singular moment of writing it, but when we're using it to really rewire our minds, super important to use the best language possible. So I think that's, in a nutshell, I think that's the reason why.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing that with my new foray into parenting, the thing that comes up a lot when I'm talking with even just like my little kids is the idea of, well, is that really what you want? Are you saying what you really want? Just that idea of saying something that you want usually doesn't involve a negative aspect. That's what you don't want, right? Like you're controlling how your mind is focused. And I think that that's such a fundamental aspect of it in keeping in that positive guide frame.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? So yeah, I think that's a great response. And I think that it's an important aspect of goal setting that I think could easily be overlooked. And just from his commentary on it, it seems like it's something that people do struggle quite a lot with in, writing something down that you really want in a way that you really want it, and how that really affects your perspective on your accomplishing of it. It can be really hard.
Yeah.
All right. So in that same vein, if we move on to number 2, the question is, how does using the tense, the present tense, affect your unconscious mind's response to the goal? So how are we really hacking our brain with saying it as though it is currently a thing that has already happened to us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I wish I knew all of the proper neuroscience terms to answer this question in a way that sounds more intelligent. I think that using the present tense essentially helps us to envision this thing as if it is already true. And so our minds, our nervous systems, our imaginations begin to build this belief that this thing is already true. And so it helps us move towards it. It helps us build belief in it. And so if we can say it in a way where it is present, it helps us move towards it, I think, in a different way than if we just are saying at some point in the future, this thing is going to happen. That doesn't build nearly as much urgency in us to move towards it as if we believe that it is closer to a present thing taking place. That builds that urgency to kind of reconcile our experience with what we're telling our brain is true. And so we can move towards the goal.
All right. Well, I love those responses for 1 and 2. And question number 3, I want to bring it back to this idea of these. I want to bring it back to this idea of reprogramming the mind. And there's such a clear focus in this lesson in these specific areas about the unconscious aspects of goal setting. And I don't think it's something that is really talked a whole lot about, even in like modern day goal setting guru things that are out there. But I wanted to explore like, why does Dad focus on it so much? Is reprogramming your unconscious mind really that important? Is it more important than just having this conscious strategy and accountable action steps? Why is it so important to control that which is inherently uncontrolled? I mean, it's unconscious. It's something we don't think about. So why is it that he puts such a focus on it, especially in his teachings broadly, but in this one in particular?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. I think, maybe a lot of us don't give a ton of weight to this suggestion of Dad's, even though it's, one of the primary tenets of much that he teaches. I think that we can tend to overlook the power of this or the importance of this. There's been tons of work done recently in the last 10 years, much after Dad taught a lot of stuff about neuroplasticity, which we've talked about before, which is just, the human capacity to retrain our brains. And that really does include the unconscious parts of our brains, that we can build new neural pathways in those places, even when they are not conscious. And I think it's less of a matter of controlling the unconscious part of your brain, because you're right, it is not within our conscious control, as it is like feeding the unconscious part of your brain, right? So I'm sure we've all heard of the parable or the old story that's told about the grandfather talking with his grandson. And he said, there are two wolves inside each of us, and they're always at war with each other. And the one wolf represents, goodness, like kindness and bravery and love. And the other wolf kind of represents the darkness and greed and hatred and fear. And the grandson says, which one wins this war of, the wolves inside of us? And the grandfather says, the one that you feed. And so to me, that's a metaphor for essentially what we're doing with this unconscious work in our brains is we're feeding the parts of ourselves that we want to kind of win that battle. And so I know I've mentioned the book Soundtracks by John Acuff before, but I also like to think of it in that way because we're like constantly playing a soundtrack in our brain that's about ourselves and our lives and our efforts in the world and our purpose in the world. And if we're not consciously programming that soundtrack, it will adapt itself to what it is being fed. And in our society, in our world, in the environment that we live in, we are not being fed things that are going to help us become the best versions of ourselves. And we're not being fed things that are going to help us become the people that we're created to be. So the conscious work is really feeding our good wolf or whatever we might want to say, so that soundtrack is reprogrammed to be guiding us towards the people that we want to be. So I don't think that it's necessarily more important than like a conscious strategy to achieve your goal. If your goal is to lose 10 pounds, you're definitely going to want to have a strategy of what you're going to eat and how you're going to exercise and how you're going to sleep and all of that. But if the soundtrack in your mind is just constantly saying, I am fat and I'm never going to lose this weight, you're going to be fighting such a more difficult battle than if you can kind of counteract that soundtrack and feed the right wolf. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily more important, but I would agree with Dad that it is as important to do these sorts of things that might take a little more effort and a little more work, but to do the work of stating these things positively, to do the work of putting them in the present tense, to do the work of defining them well, and all the other pieces of unconscious programming that we do in order to feed the right wolf and win the war.
I love that response. I think it's the perfect reminder with that analogy. If you haven't heard that before, or if you had, I think it's just a great way of explaining what it is that he's talking about in this lesson. So thank you. Thank you for all of these responses. I think it was a great bunch of responses. I think it was a great lesson. And before we leave everyone, do you have any closing thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I just say let's jump into this work, guys, and let's kind of maybe take another look at our goals now that, we're well into the year. We've probably put some work into the goals that we have created for ourselves. I know that, after listening to this and recording this, I'm going to go back and take the eye of an editor and just look and say, are these stated in the most positive way possible? Are these all in the present tense? Is there any way to make these a little more specific? Because that work of engagement will make a big difference. So let's do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Melody. And thank you, everyone, for joining us on this journey with the Reflections Cast. And remember that your support means everything. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that like button, write us a review, or leave us a voicemail. And please share this episode with friends, family, or anyone you think might benefit from our discussions. We believe in you. We're committed to helping you thrive on your journey of discovering all you were created to be. And until next time, keep reflecting, keep growing, and pass it on.